about Symmetry, but I'm going to go about it in a little bit of a roundabout way. And before I talk about completedness or wholeness, we start with fragmentation. So I guess to explain this a little, I went to a radio lab presentation last week at UCLA. And for those of you who don't know Radio Lab, it's like a radio broadcast with two guys and a girl, and they kind of merge science and music and more, I guess, humanistic elements together to create these really interesting documentaries. And they're usually just on the radio, but they had a live performance at UCLA. And their topic was symmetry. So I was pretty inspired by this, and given that I had no idea what to do for my TED Talk. That was very convenient, but I was able to use that. I'd like to share an anecdote with you that they also used in their presentation because it relates to symmetry and what else I'm going to talk about. So this quick story comes from Aristophanes' speech from Plato's Symposium. And it's essentially the story of like a jigsaw puzzle that was whole and then fragmented. So, the original human nature was not like the present. The sexes were originally 3 in number. There was man, woman, and the union of the two, which no longer exists today. Once this union was a distinct kind, with a bodily shape and name of its own, and it was constituted by the joining together of the male and the female. This unified being was round, his back and sides forming a circle. He had 4 hands and the same number of feet, 1 head with 2 faces looking opposite ways, 4 ears, 4 eyes, and so forth. He could roll over and over at a great pace, and terrible was the might and strength of this round being. The thoughts of their heart were great, and they decided to attack the gods by trying to roll up to heaven. This angered the gods, who wondered whether they should kill the humans and annihilate the race, but they also wanted sacrifices, and the people worshiped the gods, so they felt kind of torn. So ultimately Zeus decided that men shall continue to exist, but he would cut them in 2, and they'd be diminished in strength and increased in numbers. So they would walk upright on 2 legs, but be separate from their other half. So fast forward to today, and the third sex is still extinct. And yet, we all seem to possess the same ancient desire for one another. It's our instinct to reunite to our original nature, to make one of 2, and to heal the state of man. So the conclusion of that quick story is that human nature was originally one, and we were a whole, and the desire and pursuit of the whole is called love. So my speech is kind of the symmetry or wholeness of finding something you love. Clearly this anecdote kind of relates most obviously to finding one's soulmate. And so you can see that these 2 conjoined people were split, and so we spend our whole lives now searching for the other half, that person that completes us, that makes us feel whole, even if we can't really describe why that is. But I think that a more, I guess, intriguing way to apply this anecdote is to think of it in terms of our passions or our interests. And the one thing in the world that really fulfills us in a way that no other activity does. We're all involved in so many things, but it seems like for many people, there's one thing above all else that really inspires us or propels us forward with like intrigue and a desire to like pursue questioning. And as I was trying to figure out my TED Talk, I realized that for me, I think that activity is art. I've always considered myself kind of like a dilettante, like a dabbler. And it's kind of a pejorative term because it generally tends to imply that somebody is very superficial with their interests, or kind of is generally invested but has no deep-rooted talent or skill. But I realized that the one thing that's really kept with me throughout my, I guess, academic and personal life has always been art. Sorry. That's Radio Lab's logo. So having a talent that you really enjoy is something I've always really desired, but it's hard because you can be really interested in something and also not possess a mastery of that skill. And it seems like our society is structured so that we progress from amateur to master. That's kind of the way that our academic system is designed, and that's why we practice in sports for so many years, is you're supposed to progress and become just more skilled and hone your talents. So for any of you who have read Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, it kind of details how you need to invest at least 10,000 hours to become a true master. And that's a lot of hours. As Malcolm Gladwell plans out a schedule, and basically you have to invest 20 hours a week, every week for 10 years to get to 10,000 hours. I guess you could, proportion that differently, but still it's a ton of time. It's like a part-time job for 10 years. And I'm nowhere in terms of 10,000 hours in my life, in terms of art. I've taken classes, but I've never come close. I might even be at like 3,000, 2,500. That's like a generous estimate. But 10,000 hours is what the Beatles have done, is what Bill Gates has done to get to these amazingly successful careers where they are like true masters of their like given areas. But it's interesting because since I started taking art classes here at SC and really developing my skills, spending more time drawing, I have started to view art and the world in like this really interesting way. So for instance, when I look at a sunset, I obviously appreciate the aesthetic quality of that sunset, and it's like beautiful, but I've also started to view it in terms of how it would look on a canvas. So I think, what colors would I use to mix to paint that sunset? Or when I see a friend sprawled out on the couch, I think, I wonder how I would render that pose. And it's really weird how this starts to come in more and more as I start to invest more time in art. For all of you who have like an artistic endeavor that you're invested in, maybe you feel the same way, that it starts to come in and shape your perspective. And I've noticed that, especially with objects that I'm most familiar with, it's much easier for me to translate that perspective into like how I render it on paper. So for instance, I use a cup probably every day. And I'm really familiar with it. Like, I know the ins and outs of a cup, And it's just like, I got it down. I don't need to look at a cup to draw it. I've got it. It's the same as shoes or hats. They're things that I'm pretty familiar with, and I've learned to translate this technical skill onto paper pretty easily. But sometimes it's fun to kind of push that boundary of like technical skill and with a more creative lens and develop a different understanding of the more inanimate object you wouldn't normally think you'd have anything more to learn about. I used Easter egg dye color. Sometimes it's nice to experiment with line too. Like, inanimate objects for me are really cool because it seems so mechanical or so easy to just render this like lifeless thing. But when you start to use more expressive form, you add on this new element that maybe other people might not see. And so it's really cool to add your own view of life when you portray something on paper. And I guess a quote I like too is Leo Tolstoy said that art is an indirect way of communicating with one another. And I like that because as somebody who is not a fan of public speaking, I really enjoy being able to take my worldview and express it via drawing. So that's my grandma's dog, Charlie. Pets are fun because obviously you have this emotional attachment, and it's definitely much more inspiring to draw. It goes by so much faster when you're interested in your subject. I mean, I think you could say that for anything. Anything you're interested in, you're going to be more invested in spending your time. But I guess that relates back to symmetry and like finding that other half. It's really hard to know like what is going to draw you in and what's going to make you feel like your other half is being filled. And for me, drawing objects is like, it starts to fill that void, but it still can be pretty monotonous and mechanical. But incorporating narrative into artwork is one way in which I have like learned to bridge that gap with like landscape or still life. So this is like a Sunday afternoon for me as a project. We had to say or draw what we were doing that day. So I was reading Lolita for a class. I was outside. So on one hand, it's a story of my, I guess, homework. It's also a story of my major, English major. And it's just another way for me to tell someone a little bit about my life, but I guess with illustration. Art's also a nice way to convey other things you're passionate about, like skiing. Just got some new boots. I'm really stoked about it. It's my first homework assignment I did for my art class. And it's cool because, like, when I look at this, I remember certain things. Like, I was so stoked about having buckles that weren't rusted. And so I spent a lot of time doing that. So it's nice to have this archive of my memories. Kanye West says it's like his memories museum. I love that line. But it's nice to translate the artifacts of my memories museum onto paper. But then the human form gets a little more tough. This is where my 10,000 hours or lack thereof kind of starts to show a lot more, I think. With inanimate objects, like I said, I have this pretty strong familiarity with them. I can understand it, and I don't need to focus so hard on rendering it. But people, I have less of a grasp on. I feel like when I am drawing people, I don't necessarily understand them as a whole, and so I feel like when I draw them, I'm not representing everything. So it's definitely a little bit more uncomfortable, but it's also a bigger challenge. So the human hand's a good way to start. I like it. Because it's something you use every day, but it's not something necessarily you're checking out all the time. And it's cool when you look at a hand and really see that it's telling you more than just your 5 fingers. It's also showing you, like, you know, scars or like wear and tear. It's like another way of defining you in these really subtle ways that you might not otherwise perceive. But doing a close study will provide you that opportunity, especially when you refine your drawings and take a slightly different approach. You can get even better results. And then the feet. The feet are another good way to get additional introspection, I think. Especially because it's a part of our body that's like pretty essential to traveling, to doing almost anything, to getting from one place to another. But it's also, like, a lot of people don't like feet. They're kind of dirty. They're kind of sketch, I guess. Especially like a road model's feet that you're drawing. It can be this really interesting experience. But the feet are another way, which is like such an essential part of our bodies, that when you do this really close study, you're not only thinking about the like physical attributes, but you're also reflecting on the use of your own feet. And it's this cool way to, I guess, be doing 2 things at once, that dual mentality of literally physically rendering something, but also, I guess, transcending into this like more philosophical mindset of like the foot and your life. The human sketches are also pretty cool because it's less mechanical than like the technical rendering of like a cup or a ski boot. There's definitely more movement, and it's like this chance to infuse a little bit of like soul into it. Like, it's less harsh, it's less defined, and you're like getting like their essence in there. And they're kind of sloppy, but there's something like really romantic about it, you know, like it. And I think those kind of sketches speak to me, and I always am attracted to artists like that who can, I guess, bring a little bit more humanity as opposed to more like mechanical, computerized, like detailed drawing. But like I said, these 10,000 hours have to come into play at some point, and I've tried really hard to use anything I can. Sorry, not safe for work. Anyone watching this? So yeah, I had to take a class with models, and it's cool to be able to use the human form and relate to it in a way you normally wouldn't. At first, I was really uncomfortable with like a nude model. I was unaware there would be a nude model in my class. I laughed the first day, and I did. But I think the crazy thing is, once you start drawing people long enough, they kind of turn into objects. Like, you're so focused on itemizing each part of their body. Like, it's not like, you know, someone's naked chest. It's like this piece of an organism that you're just trying to like communicate on paper. But there's always increase that damn head. And it's so hard for me to draw it. And part of it is just, it's like not enough practice, but another part of it is that it's like the face takes a body and turns it into a human for me. Like without the head, it's just this set of pieces. But you put on that face and there's like a soul behind it. And it's just so hard. I want to do it justice. And so I just ignored it. But I keep thank you DOZ Twister for my final project. And I'm getting there, but sometimes the faces still, they're like kind of cartoony. It's really hard to get that like genuine expression, and it bothers me. I don't want to do anyone the injustice of not representing them like to the best that I can. But I guess in this process I've gotten to know people maybe on a more intimate level instead of just like staring at them for hours while I'm trying to depict what's happening and what I view. So thank you to my unsuspecting friends whose Facebooks I've used for my sometimes it doesn't go well and I abandon it halfway through. Sorry, Julia. I really tried, but you know. Generous. Oh God. Other times I just like see a picture and I just want to draw it. I just love, like there's certain things that strike me and it's kind of like this moment of inspiration. Maybe divine inspiration, but beam of inspiration. And I'll just like whip out the sketchbook and try to draw it. Doesn't always work.
That's good.
I'll make that but it's really cool because you get to see these things about people you wouldn't know. Like you might not know that somebody has like these really delicate almond-shaped eyes, or like crow's feet that like have come from them smiling so much, or like a chipped tooth because you know they raged way too hard that one night, but they didn't really good job of hiding it. And it's really cool that when you start to sit down and really focus on some of those faces, you hear or you see the stories that aren't always shared, but exist and are always present. This is my last one. This is my final project, and it was cool because it was a merging of a couple of things I like: art and skiing, and this thing is cool. But this was really cool because I was really invested in it. I like love skiing, and it was my friends I was going skiing with. I was doing something, like I just like to do art, and I realized at this point, like this project was like the culmination of my re-entry into the world of art after a 5 or 6 year hiatus. And it was this turning point where I realized like I want to invest those 10,000 hours. Like this is something that I'm passionate about. It's something that I'm definitely not the best at by any means, but it's something that's like a meditation, not just a hobby or a technical skill. And I'm excited to hopefully at some point become a master, but at least for now, it's providing a nice symmetry in my life.